Good morning, everybody. It might be the afternoon, it might be the evening. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So I'm doing my Friday walk, and I wanted to reflect on a couple of things that I've talked about this week in the group page. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was stopping doing things that you are doing that are not benefiting you, and that could in fact be causing you problems, and could in fact be keeping you in this perpetual state of injury and in the injury cycle. Now, I wanted to take a second just to talk about the medical industry and doctors. And I have no problem with doctors, I have no problem with the medical industry, but I wanted to tell you about one time when I went to see the doctor, and I went in with a problem, and there was no questions asked about what I do, or what my diet was, or what my exercise regime was. There was no questions asked about what I do. It was just, here's a painkiller, take a painkiller. And you know, while that's okay in the short term, yes, take a painkiller, get the pain away, whatever, it doesn't really help to change the situation. And I'm all about changing the situation. I'm all about changing what's going on, to change the reason why you're getting injured, or the reason why you're in the injury cycle. Now, if you keep doing the thing that's keeping you in the injury cycle, or the thing that's making you injured, how is adding anything else into your equation going to change that? So the first thing that I always want to do, and I know people get really kind of fed up with me when I do this, but somebody asks me a question, the first thing I do is ask them a question back. And I know sometimes that rubs people up the wrong way. It's like, well, why is he asking me a question? Why isn't he just answering my question? Well, because a lot of the time I can't answer the question if I don't have more information. And you might not know what information that I need in order to give you the answer that's going to be the right answer, the best answer, or the fullest answer to get you the best result. But generally speaking, and I think in most cases this is going to be the way it is, you'll need to start by stopping doing certain things that you are doing. And in the most cases, that's going to be all the things that I talk about not doing, which is things like stretching. And there's going to be certain cases where somebody who has never got out of their chair to do any exercise is going to need range of motion training, mobility training, and that's something that the Basic 8 is going to do really, really well, because it takes our bodies through full range of motion. That doesn't necessarily mean that we need to start stretching ourselves. That's not what we should be doing, because like I've posted the research on this, how the human body is designed to resist stretch. It's designed to resist stretching forces. And the way it does that is by having fascia, which is highly innervated with nerves, nerve dense. And those nerves are sensing, amongst other things, the rate of stretch and the amount of stretch, to then communicate that directly to the muscles to contract, to avoid overstretching. So if we have a situation in our body where we actively resist stretch by nerves and muscles that protect the soft tissues that sense the stretch, and we're going in there and forcing those stretches, and we're damaging those tissues, because those tissues are easily damaged. It's called plastic deformation, where we take a tissue, or it can be anything really. It could be steel. You take it to a point where it stretches, it doesn't go back. That's called plastic deformation. It doesn't have to be plastic to have plastic deformation. Elastic has plastic deformation, so does steel, so do lots of other materials. But we're talking about fascia here, and fascia is subject to the same rules of plastic deformation. If you stretch it too far, or if you stretch it too often, or too much, too long duration, it will deform, and that is the last thing you want to do. So like I said, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do if you want to get injury free is stop doing the things that are causing your injury. Now, I can't see how that's debatable. I can't see how that's illogical. I can't see how that's really questionable. Really, I mean, you can question it, but the answer is, why would you not do it? If here's the thing that's causing you injury, stop doing the thing that's causing you injury, and you won't be injured anymore, right? It's like a drug addict. Hi, I'm a drug addict and I want to get off drugs. Well, the answer isn't going to be, okay, let's put you through rehab and keep you taking drugs, right? The answer is going to be, stop taking the drugs and then go through rehab, and then go through a program that gets you off the drugs, or that works on the behavioral issues that are going on in the background, right? So the first thing you've got to do is stop doing the things that are damaging you, causing the injury. Now that, believe it or not, that can be also the strength training that you're doing, because we know that strength training affects the muscle tension in our bodies. It has to. That's what it does. If it didn't, it wouldn't be strengthening you. Okay, so the reason why you strength train is to change the tension in your muscles, also to change the amount of force that a muscle can produce. Now, here's the thing. If your strength training is unbalanced strength training, i.e. you are working one movement or two movements way more than you're working the opposing movements to those movements, you got a problem. You got a big problem. Because what you're going to have is you're going to have joints like the hip, for example, where if you do things that involve externally rotating the hip, that's pulling the leg outwards. Look at my shadow, like that, or like that, turning outwards. So for example, squats, they keep me in this position, okay? If you don't do the opposite of those movements, which I guarantee you don't. You might think you do, but you don't. Then you've got a problem, because your hip joint is now going to favour that movement at all times more than the opposite movement, i.e. you're going to walk with your feet pointing out, or at some point during your gait, your foot is going to flick out. Okay? Now that flicky out foot is one of the biggest problems I see with runners. You've got a flicky out foot, which what happens is this. The foot flicks out and it travels around in a circle. Maybe not quite that big of a circle, but it will, as it comes off the ground, it will flick out, which will cause this knee to go in. So if this leg is flicking out, as it comes off the ground, this knee is going to go inwards. I see that all the time. I see that really often. And in what I just showed you there, my right leg is flicking out. That's called a medial heel whip. So my heel, when the foot comes off the ground, goes inwards and the toes go outwards. That's called a medial heel whip. If that's happening on my right leg, chances are that my left knee is going to go inwards when it's on the ground because of that action. Because as we know, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and in the body it has to stabilize. So if I've got a right leg that's flicking outwards, it's causing a torque to my whole body. That's going to go straight to my knee. Now, the reason why that hip flicks out, or the reason why that foot flicks outwards, is because of an imbalance at the hip. And that imbalance at the hip could be due to something else. For example, limited torso rotation, an anterior pelvic tilt. So what we see is the foot flicking out. But the reason for that is not the foot, it's not the knee, it's probably not the hip. those are probably symptoms of the overall problem, which is the movement is imbalanced. Now, if squats cause that issue, how are squats going to fix that issue? Because all you're doing is throwing petrol onto a fire. Okay? Squats will ingrain that issue. Squats will ingrain that movement. Squats will make those muscles that are causing that problem stronger. Squats won't help with your rotational movement. Squats won't help you move better. Squats won't help you internally rotate. They won't help you with the levers of gait. They won't help you lift your pelvis up on one side and then lift it up on the other side, because squats demand that you keep the pelvis level. And the irony of that is everything you want the squat to do, it does the absolute opposite of what you want it to do. You want it to strengthen you for running, and it doesn't. You want it to make your running better, but it doesn't. Because it doesn't work the levers that are involved in the gait cycle. Right? We know that strength is specific to the movement, period. So if strength is specific to the movement, I've got to be producing that movement to get stronger at that movement, right? It kind of just makes sense, doesn't it? If I want stronger triceps, I have to work my triceps, right? I have to go from a bent elbow to a straight elbow in order to work my triceps, right? And if I want stronger triceps, I don't go and work my biceps, right? If I want stronger triceps, I've got to do the movement that my triceps produce. And that's the same thing with running. If I want to produce a stronger movement, I must actually, to some degree, to quite a big degree actually, I must produce the movement of running. Now, I can break it down into little parts, but I have to then put it back together. Because there's something called inter and intramuscular coordination, which is all about how we control our joints and our bodies. And there's a very simple thing to think about here. If you want to pick up a cup of coffee in the morning, if you couldn't control how much force was produced with the muscles in your arms, your shoulders, your chest, and all those different muscles in your wrist and your forearm, if you couldn't control how much force those muscles produced at one time, what you'd end up doing is you'd end up either crushing your coffee cup. Let's assume it's a Starbucks cup and it's a paper cup, right? And you go to pick it up and you produced 50 pounds of force in your grip. You'd crush the cup and your coffee would go all over the place. Now let's say it was a mug, and you picked up the mug with the right amount of force in your grip strength, but then your biceps produced 50 pounds of force. You'd throw that cup over your shoulder. You wouldn't smoothly and slowly bring it to your lips in the way that you need to when you're drinking your cup of coffee or trying to drink your cup of coffee. So all of these things play a massive role in how we move and how we train for that movement. And when you think about it like that, and you remember that strength is specific to the movement, and not only just the movement, but the speed of the movement. How fast do I need to produce the movement of running? Well, for some people it's 2.5 times a second, for some people it's 3 times a second, for some people it's more than 3 times a second, right? Depends on your cadence. Now, if you're trying to produce a faster cadence, and we know that strength is specific to the movement, the speed of the movement, blah, 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 the range of motion, the vector of force, all these different things, then how is doing slow squats that go up and down vertically, not horizontally. They go up and down vertically. Remember, running is horizontal force predominantly. The vertical force comes as a result of producing horizontal force because of the levers of the foot and the hip. Okay? Squats doesn't teach you that. Slow squats certainly don't teach you that. There's no type of squat that will teach you any of that the way that it needs to be taught for running, or the way that it needs to be practiced. And remember, practice doesn't make perfect. It doesn't make perfect. It never does. Practice makes permanent. Whatever you practice, you'll become good at that. So if you practice a movement that you don't want to occur, i.e. external rotation, the position that your hips are in during a squat, that's external rotation. If you're practicing external rotation, and running, as we know, is powered by internal rotation, but yet you're practicing and training and getting stronger and more dominant at that joint in external rotation, but running is internal rotation powered. That's the equivalent of trying to hit a tennis ball over the net to your opponent, but doing it with a racket that's swinging backwards, not forwards. So if I'm going to hit a tennis ball over the net, I need to swing my racket forwards to hit the ball so that it goes over the net, it goes towards my opponent. But what I keep doing is I get to the tennis ball and I swing the racket backwards. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. When you do squats for running, which is an oxymoron, it's a complete oxymoron. There is no such thing as squats for running, because it's a completely different movement in its entirety. Okay? That's what you're doing. You're getting to the tennis ball and then you're swinging your racket backwards and wondering why the ball's going backwards and not forwards. So let's just recap. Let's recap a little bit of what we talked about, because I know there's been quite a few things that we've talked about. The first thing is, if you're injured, you've got to stop doing the things that are injuring you. You've got to stop doing the things that are causing you pain, causing you to get injured. And then you've got to stop strength training, doing the movements that don't apply, or in fact actually go completely in the opposite direction or against the movement. Okay? So we need to stop stretching, because stretching damages, absolutely damages, soft tissues. We need to stop doing that, because remember, the best runners are actually the most elastic, and elasticity is the opposite of flexibility. It's the exact opposite. All right, it's the exact opposite. Elasticity is about how you return to the shape or the form before the force was applied. Okay, so you're returning to your previous form when you take away the load. Now, our bodies are amazing at that. It's called neutral posture. It's called balanced posture. Okay? Now, if you can't return to what your body should be, how are you going to move? Well, because you can't return to it. So you just can't produce good movement. And you might be really great at producing movement in one direction and absolutely diabolical at producing it in the other direction. Or maybe even you just can't produce it at all. So in the situation with a lateral hip drop, so for example, if your right leg is on the ground and your left hip drops, you can't start strengthening the hip. You can't start strengthening the hip, because that hip has already been subjected to a huge amount of load every single step that you took for the last however many weeks, months, years you've been running. It's already been subjected to a huge amount of load, because the other groups of muscles, the other lever actions, weren't working. So that lever action, that muscle group, has been doing all the work on its own, and it's overworked, it's overstressed, it's dying a slow, painful death. And what you're doing, what you're trying to do, probably, if you've been to your physical therapist and they've applied their rules to it, is they're going to say, oh, this hip's weak, this hip's really weak, it needs strengthening. So what you're doing is put it into context of what you're actually doing. That muscle group is not weak, it's overworking. It's overworking because the other muscle groups that are supposed to be helping it aren't helping it. That's like you being at work all day and you have a team of 5 people that you work with and you're the 6th person, and those 5 people, they went out for lunch and they never came back. They didn't bother coming back after lunch, they didn't come back the next day. In fact, they went on a massive trip and they didn't bother coming back ever. But you're still sitting there doing all the work of 6 people and living in hope that those other 5 are going to return to alleviate you of all the stress and pressure that you're under. But then your boss, when you complain to him, that's your hip complaining to you. When you complain to your boss, saying, oh, I can't do this anymore, it's so stressful, what they do is they go, actually, we've just taken on another contract and you're going to have to do more work. That'll fix your problem, won't it? And you sit there and look at your boss and go, huh? I'm already overworking. I'm already overworked. How can I do more work if I'm already overworking? Well, unfortunately, that's what your physical therapist has just done to you. Well, more specifically, they've done it to your hip muscle and your tendons and the bursa. They're all going to have to now work even harder because you're giving them extra work. So the first thing you've got to do, like I said, is you've got to stop doing the things that are causing the problem. Stop doing the things that are damaging you, i.e. stretching, because I'm sure you've tried stretching to fix it and it didn't work. And then you've got to get an approach that starts from the start. It doesn't just look at how strong you are, because running doesn't care how much you can squat. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. It's also irrelevant how long you can hold a plank for. Completely irrelevant how long you can hold a plank for. It's so irrelevant. That's why I say take it out of your tool bag, because it's irrelevant. Right? Because strength, like we said before, is specific to the movement. And if there's no movement, it can't be an exercise for a movement that requires movement. Right? And it certainly is not working on your posture, ever. There is no way that a plank can be working on your posture. None. No way. It's impossible, because it actually perpetuates a lot of the bad things that are going on with your posture. Okay, so stop doing the things that are causing the problem, stop doing arbitrary stuff that's not helping you, and then what you can do is, once you've freed up a load of time, because if we take away all those things that you're doing that aren't helping you, if we take away all those things, you're going to have a load of time. You're going to have all this time where previously you've been saying, oh, but I stretch for half an hour a day. Brilliant. As soon as you stop stretching, you've got half an hour a day back of your life. And you can start doing the right things. You can start doing the things that are going to help you. It just makes sense, doesn't it? That's the thing, it just makes sense. You can't get off the drugs if you keep taking the drugs. You can't. You can't stop taking drugs. You can't get free of drugs if you're still taking drugs, right? It's kind of obvious. So let's apply that same logic to running and to injury prevention and injury treatment. If I move better, chances are probably not going to get injured anywhere near as much. And there's people in this group who have been using the sling method who have been injured for years, and they stopped doing all the things that they were doing and started doing just the sling method. Just the sling method. And guess what? Injury free within 4 months. Because they dedicated all of that time to just doing it. It doesn't even matter if you don't understand it yet. You didn't understand squats, but you still did them. You didn't understand stretching, but you still did them. You still did it. You didn't understand planks, but you still did it. You don't have to understand it, and you've already proven that to yourself. You don't need to understand it to do it. And as soon as you see that logic, it will be like a massive floodlight going off in your brain. It won't be a light bulb, it will be a floodlight. Because it will not only illuminate the things that I'm saying, it'll illuminate all the things that I'm saying not to do as well, and you'll see it. So, that's enough rambling for today. I'm sure these dogs are going to start barking as soon as I go over there, so it's a good time for me to sign off. And there we go. And have a fantastic rest of your day and weekend. And I hope some of this stuff is hitting home, making sense. And remember, I've done this for free to help you. This is one of the free things that I do, right? Just to help open your eyes. So don't click off after 4 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute. Listen to the whole thing, because there's loads of little gems here that will help you, and it's all free. It's all free. It's all free in this group. All free. All right? You want the free stuff that's in this group. That's the stuff that we want to say don't do. But if you want to know what to replace it with, that's where my work is. You have to get the book for that. You have to get the training manual. And it will change your life. It will change your life. First thing is, it will give you time back in your life as well. And then the benefits afterwards. It's going to be pretty cool once you're running again and you're able to say, yeah, my Garmin's not broken, and nor am I. And here's the proof. Look at my running. All right? Have a fantastic rest of your day and your weekend. Take care. Go for a walk. Bye-bye.